We're streaming now.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 28th board meeting of the Salt Lake City School Board of Education. We are excited to be streaming live, and we are grateful for the support that you all give us as we try new technologies and try new things. I'm trying to make this as open a process as possible, given the circumstances that we're under. We appreciate the flexibility of all the board members and the support of our superintendent for helping this to happen. So welcome. We have all the board members by video on WebEx. Wave board members, and Mr. Nemelka at the district office. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Lexi's told me that she will lead us in that.
Allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first thing we have on our agenda is our consent agenda, consisting of the purchasing and accounting reports and the West High travel request. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
I have a motion from Chris and a second from Catherine. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, let's go ahead and vote. Mr. Nemelka, how do you vote on the consent agenda? Do we have Mike with us?
He's a yes.
Mike,
He's a yes.
Yes. All right. Catherine?
Yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Sam?
Samuel Hanson, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right. The consent agenda is approved. Thank you for that. We will move on to our reports, which is a COVID-19 update from our superintendent, Dr. Cunningham.
Thank you for that. We are continuing to work through our COVID-19. Our IT department has been putting out hotspots. We have offered those to our secondary, our middle school, and we are now putting those out for our elementary. We are in the process of putting Wi-Fi capability onto 5 of our buses so that we can push buses out, into the community so they can continue to support our students. There's been a lot of communication coming out from USBE on how the expectation from USBE is that we finish through what our published calendars are. We finish through to the end of the year. Apparently there were some districts that were trying to finish early, and we received an email from Dr. Dixon that we are to finish through the year as we had published on our calendar. So we are this weekend and part of next week, we have some students that need to get into schools to pick up stuff from their lockers and different things like that. So the school site is making a plan so that students can come in and pick up their things. We also have some teachers that are retiring and are moving, and so we've made provisions to put boxes in their rooms so they can get in to box things up, and Paul and his department will help move if necessary. Since we're going to be in this longer, I've shared with you that we are easing the restrictions on our tracks and our tennis courts. Those should be open so our communities can use those. We do still have the playgrounds. We're advising people not to use the playground because that still is a city and a county order. There was a nice video that Governor Herbert put out today that we sent home to parents and all of our teachers talking about COVID and how we are moving forward and those sort of things. So we've not been given any direction yet on what summer will look like, if we'll be able to bring people back in or if we'll still be under a dismissal. Hopefully we'll get more information from that next week.
All right, thank you for that, Lexi. Is that the sum of your update?
Mm-hmm.
Then okay, I'll open it to board members for questions.
I have one.
Is that you, Mr. Namelka?
Yeah, having some parents contact me, want to know if we're going to be having summer school.
We don't yet have summer school. We've not been given that direction
And
yet.
come from the state.
Hasn't come from the state. I'm hoping we'll hear something in the next week or so.
We can't make this. Has to be a state.
Because we're in a closure, yep.
Okay.
So Lexi, you think next week you might hear something about the summer schedule?
I'm hoping so.
Absolutely.
We have a meeting with Dr. Dixon next week, yes.
Okay. Catherine, I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
I know that some students need to get in to get things like art supplies that they didn't get out before when they thought that we'd be going back to school in May. And so I'm wondering what arrangements have been made for that. And then I have noticed when I've been passing schools on walks that the fields are indeed free, and I've noticed that they're mostly being used as dog parks. So I don't know. I mean, I know we have signs saying no dogs. I don't know if we care about that right now, but I just wanted to say that I have noticed that, and I don't know if other people have noticed that. And I it troubles me I guess what troubles me is dog poop on our fields, but maybe it's not an issue right now. I just wanted to ask about that. And then the other thing is that one thing that I hoped we could get today was a report about what our financial situation was in terms of COVID and how much money we might be saving or spending, et cetera.
Okay. Each school, I'll tackle the first question. Each school is creating their own schedule of how teachers and students will get in. So that looks very different. We are letting that each of the schools deal with that. So they are in the process of notifying teachers and students. So it will look different at each school site. Some of our elementary schools have decided to put all of the students' belongings from desks and things like that in Ziploc bags. Other schools are allowing students to come in, so it does look very different on that. I'm happy to talk to Mr. Schulte about the dogs. We could put up more signs, but I'm not sure other than that how to monitor that. We could have our facility people once or twice a day go out and check, but I just don't know if that would be, I don't know. I don't know if people are coming in the morning or evening, so I don't know how to tackle that, but I can think about that. We have said to our principals that we'll keep schools open at night if we need to, and we'll open them on Saturdays if that's helpful. So I did want to put that out there. We're saving, I would assume we're saving some of the dollar amount on electricity and air and things like that, but we're paying all of our salaries and we are paying for community ed and things like that. So with some of our CARES money, we are trying to put some of the salaries that we are using now for extending for lunches and our after school people and how they're helping us. We're trying to recapture that with some of our CARES money. Plus, we know that we will have to do some compensatory ed for special education. And so we have put that into our CARES request also.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. Can we just get a report about how much CARES money we got sort of some of those things. And, I mean, I'm glad I know we'll have expenses, but I'm wondering how much we're saving, for example, I don't know, in paper costs or, things like that, and what else we might be saving in. Just like to have that update, like what are the extra costs and what are the savings? Could we get more specific information about that? Would be really great. Thank you.
All right.
One more thought, I think we ought to just tell the principals, just use this as over, not worry about it. We don't have any idea at all how much you're saving. And I don't think it's important right now, Catherine.
And I do think that principals should be able to carry their budgets over as well, Mike. I agree with you. I just wonder what the district is saving, and I think that a report would be important and nice to have. I think, I don't know I didn't know that we had received CARES money. I think that's kind of information we should receive. And, I just would like to have that information as a board member, exercising my fiduciary responsibility.
Thanks for that, Catherine.
We've just been given our kind of general amount, and all of the schools are putting in if that, such and such a percent will go to special ed, such and such a percent will go to salaries. So we are just putting in those projections now.
So as you do that, as you complete that report, Lexi, that would be great for us to see.
Perfect. I just think
Thank
it's
you.
important for us to be monitoring what's happening financially in the district.
Okay.
Thanks for that. So let's move to Sam.
Thank you. I just, and I will address this when we get to the discussion section too on some other items, but I think it would be great. I know we've heard that all of our hourly employees are working if they want to be. I would assume there's been some attrition. And I think it would be good for us to look at that and know what that's been, because, depending on how dire the situation is, in the next year or so, it would be nice to know who has left of their own volition that could possibly not be replaced, and just what that does to all of the numbers that we're looking at. But we can talk about that a little more in the discussion section. But I also wanted to suggest that it might be a nice idea I'm happy to hear that we're developing a plan for compensatory education for special ed students. It might be nice if we had like a task force or a group of teachers and or administrators that were working on a summer plan to contact those students that haven't been contacted or have been barely in touch with their schools over the last few weeks, so we can focus some attention on them, rather than, I mean, that would be where my priority would be for the summer, and then that group could also serve as a good group of people to help in the transition that we're about to go through.
Okay. Any other comments?
The last thing I would add, Melissa, is just a follow-up to Catherine's point about a report, is just how I know we got an email from James about SLEF and the funding that we have available to us. Just seeing if that can be incorporated into the report at all, because I'm sure the donations that we have been seeking are going to support some of these initiatives, probably more around the basic needs relative to the food boxes and whatnot. But I think it'd still be nice to see that line item in there as well.
Good point.
Okay, it still feels like there's a lot of decisions to be made with guidance coming through the state board, and I appreciate you staying on top of that, Lexi, and keeping us informed as you get information and as you have those conversations. And I'm sure that we will continue to have questions. So we'll talk about that as we go. But if we are comfortable moving forward, let's do that. Thank you all. I really appreciate the thoughtful questions you ask, and appreciate your support, Lexi. Moving to our discussion agenda, the first item is the process for new board member interviews. So as you know, we will be appointing a new board member next Tuesday.
Right.
Lexi, go ahead and let you tell everybody where we're at as far as just the application process, when it closes, and how that timeline will look right now.
I received 2 additional applications today. You're up to 4 applications for that seat. We are accepting applications through Friday afternoon.
Once that application, the window's closed, then, and we post the agenda, those names will be made public. They'll be on our agenda.
Yes.
So it's a public process. We will be interviewing in public. And I believe you all have the questions that we used last year for this process. So I'd love to know if you're comfortable with using those same questions and a similar process to what we did a year ago. I'm looking for feedback on that. So specific to the questions and the process itself. Have anybody want to?
Mr. Namelka?
I think Catherine raised her hand, and then we'll hear from Mike.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Melissa. I did like the questions and appreciated them last year. I would like to see a question about how they feel about the late start initiative that our board has voted on already to begin in fall 2021. I'd like to have a question about late start and their opinions about late start and what they think about late start. And also maybe hear what they think is crucial in terms of the emergency that we're in, what they think needs to be considered particularly carefully in light of the fact that we are doing online schooling. So those would be 2 questions I suggest.
So you would do a question about late starts and a question about the current COVID-19 pandemic crisis and what they feel like priorities are for that.
Right.
Okay. I'm writing these down. Perhaps I see your hand, Christy. First, we'll hear from Mike because his hand was raised before, and then you. What I'd like to do is just quickly read out loud what the questions we used before are, so that they're on our minutes and record. We used 5 questions last year. They were: what are the greatest educational needs in your precinct? Describe what you believe to be 1 to 2 of the major challenges facing the school district and explain how you would address these challenges. And number 3, if you could change one thing in the Salt Lake City School District, what would it be and how would you change it? And 4, if this were I guess there were 4 questions. If there were an election year and you were a candidate for the Board of Education, what would your key message be to your constituency? I mean, maybe I would reword that a little differently because it is an election year. But I still think that what that question's getting to is relevant. It's so those are the 4 questions. Mr. Namelka?
Yeah, can you, first off, can you email that all to us, those questions? You hear me?
He wants to know if you can email the questions to him.
Yes, I will do that. I'm sorry, Mike. I thought you already had them, but I will do that.
Second one, I want to see him face to face. So I don't know whether the board plans on being or not, but I think we can get them 6 foot separation. But I want to see him face to face. I don't want to do it over the phone. My thought.
So I'll take that opinion, Mike, and I appreciate that. But I would like the board to talk about that too. My gut instinct is just that I would hate to ask somebody to do that, given that the guideline is that we don't. I don't want to put them in a position like that right out of the gate. But I will take what the board take board opinion on that as well. Thanks for sharing it, Mike. I'm with you. I wish I could see people in face to face. I think that makes a difference if you're in the same room. But I feel like that might be risky at this point. Let's see. I had Christy next, and then Sam.
Thanks, Melissa. You already answered one of my questions, which was what were the questions. So thank you. So I want us to be really cautious about, And although I appreciate, what Catherine said about the late start, I feel like, then we could open up to social emotional. How do you feel about reading? What do you think about the new quadrant system with special ed? I feel like, by going down this path of asking them how they feel about specific things, that I just don't think that's what I want to be a part of the interview. I think the questions that we have would lead definitely to the one that Catherine brought up with COVID-19. What are the challenges? And, I think that we had really great responses. We had good conversations, last year with the interviewees. And of course, would be interested to hear what Sam has to say since he was one of those interviewees last year. But I would just
Oh. Looks like we're losing you, Christy.
Lousy night.
Well, we're waiting for Christy's sound to come back on. Sam, do you wanna go ahead and tell us what you're thinking?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it would be unfair to anybody who was immunocompromised, and we certainly don't know that about our prospective candidates, to ask them to go to the district office. As far as questions and my experience, my experience last year was obviously it was obviously a very difficult time for me personally, but I would agree that I thought that it was generally um, productive, and I found what my fellow applicants had to say to be thought-provoking, and so I don't think that we need to reinvent the wheel. It might be nice if if we're looking for a middle ground between um, asking specific questions about specific issues and not making sure that we move away from that. We could we could establish a process where every board member gets to ask one follow-up question or something like that. I don't know, that might be a fairer way. That's just a thought. It was kind of strange to be sitting there and you know, clearly you all were asking us questions that you were rotating through a set list, and so there was not a lot of spontaneity. But there's an argument to be made for both ways of doing that, and so I guess I would say we don't want it to go on too long, but I would be okay with having each board member be allowed to ask one follow-up question, um, especially if we only have 4 applicants by the end of the week still. If we get 10 more people, then that might be a little onerous, but
Okay. No, that's good feedback, Sam. Any other, Nate, do you have something you want to contribute to this?
I'll defer back to Christy since she's back with us.
Oh,
I'm not
good.
sure if she had a chance to.
We
finish her
took a
thought.
little segue between, we took a break. And now we'll
Oh,
turn your sound
gosh.
on. Yep.
That's okay. I have no idea where you lost me at. I was just advocating for.
You're still just talking. I love it.
I know. It's like when you're talking about this and you go, hello, hello. Anyway, I just would like us to try not to be really concentrated on specific things that the board is working on right now because it's too varied. So if we're going to add in one, then we'd have to consider adding in others. That's all.
So yeah, thank you for that, Christy. I think what you may have missed was Sam's, as is usual, very thoughtful comment, which perhaps we could, rather than adding 1 or 2 questions, give board members an opportunity to each go around and ask one question themselves. So we have these 4 standard questions that we rotate through, but also that kind of get to the meat of the larger comprehensive picture, but give board members each an opportunity to ask something more specific to what they want to get at as far as learning about the candidate. I think that could certainly be specific to Late Start, but it could also be, something you want to know about them. I like that idea. I think if we go that way, I'd love to see what those questions are, have you submit those questions, and so I can put them out for all the board to see at least before we do that. But I think that's not a bad way to get at it, actually. If we have, as Sam said, maybe if we have lots more people apply and we have 10 or more to get through, that adding potentially 6 more questions could make those interviews long, but probably more valuable. So I think that's something for us to be thinking about. Any other comments on those specific questions?
Melissa, I can go ahead and weigh in now. And of course, here's Nate again in the middle. I kind of like tend to feel like, regardless of what we decide to do, that the question should be, pretty not only specific, but should be the same for each candidate. If we do decide to add, a board member question, it should be the same question that gets asked of each candidate from us as an individual board member. I just am kind of thinking back to my, while short career, but I made a lot of hires in the last 5 or 6 years. Some as a board member, like for the library, when we hired Pete, our director. I was co-chair of the search committee there, and then just working in the city, and now here at the library, where I've continued to hire people. There's a lot of bias that can be mixed in, and eliminating as much bias as possible in these types of processes is really key and crucial to making sure that it's fair and equitable for everybody that's involved. So I would just hate for us to have a different question for each candidate, just based on the conversation or what folks are talking about. So I would just caution us that we should be asking each candidate the same questions. And I think at this point, relative to specifics, relative to what we're working on, I was a little hesitant with that, and I think kind of similarly to last year, just kind of looking to see what candidates are already talking about or thinking about, I think comes out in the answers that they give. Lets me know how much they're paying attention or not to what it is that we are doing. So, of course, I'll follow the will of the board, but I would just caution us to in the moment start thinking of questions that we would ask individual candidates, and that we should have those submitted, beforehand, and those will be the only questions that we ask.
So that is actually what I would recommend. That if you have a specific question you'd like to ask, if that's the direction we want to go, that you submit that beforehand, and that we ask the same question of every candidate. You, as a board member, ask that same question of every candidate. Sam?
So can I suggest that maybe we just each submit our extra question to you? We can give ourselves the same deadline as the candidates of May 1st. And then you can let us know if we have duplicative questions.
I'm happy to do that if that's what the board would like to do. I think there's some value in that, figuring out, getting to know them a little bit better on a more personal level too. So, I think that works. I'll email you these questions. I'm sorry if you don't already have them, but I'll email you the ones we have. And then if you want to think about what you would ask, what I would do is, how would we do this? Because we want to make sure that we're asking good questions too. So I would say, yeah, if you want to submit a question, and I'll share them with the whole board. Catherine?
I suggest that we submit our questions and have board leadership just, make sure that they're not duplicative and that they're well phrased and well framed and good questions. And then, maybe present them to us for our feedback. But I think that would probably be satisfactory as our leadership.
Okay. Do I want more firm direction on that? Do we need to move this, or how is everybody feeling? I just want to make sure I'm actually following the will of the board here. Christy?
So I'm gonna lean towards what Nate was saying, and maybe not be so middle of the road, because you're really not, Nate, middle of the road. I just want to. I'm feeling the same way he is. I want us to be very cautious about what we're going to be doing here, and because if all of us submit, maybe you guys only pick three. How are those going to be divided? I'm worried about what that's going to look like. The other piece is that for further direction, I think that we need to, look at how we interview at the district level. We stay with specific questions. Everybody gets the same question. So I'm just a little nervous about. Um, I'm feeling the same way that Nate is. I just want us to be very cautious about how we go down this trail.
Well, I think you're hearing, I think I'm hearing that, Christy, and from Nate. I want to assure you that I'm not talking about just throwing out random questions or different questions for every candidate. I'm not even suggesting that I will choose which questions then get asked. I'm just wanting to give board members an opportunity to ask a question that they feel is important for them to know, as far as being able to choose a candidate, basically. And I do think that that's important. I do think that that's important. And I want to give you that opportunity. And that's an equal opportunity for every board member, right? So I want to hear. I mean, I think it would be useful to hear what those questions are. I wouldn't personally, Nate and I wouldn't be choosing between questions. If it's your question that you've submitted, then you could ask that. I'm not necessarily, I mean, I haven't spent enough time thinking about this yet, because we're just talking about it now, to even know what my question would be, right? But I mean, I do like something that was mentioned through this conversation of specifics to our board priorities of social emotional learning and literacy. Might be interesting to know what candidates think about those board priorities. But I'm just brainstorming now, right? Because this is something I'm throwing out there, based on this conversation. I do think it could be useful for us to have those specific questions. It would be something we would know in advance. I think it would be potentially even something that we could attach to our agenda. So those 4 plus potentially 6 questions would be public questions. And I think there's lots of ways for us to make this a transparent process. And that's something that I feel like is really important. Which leads me to something else I want to make sure we are thinking about as we go through this process, which is that this is an election cycle for this seat. So in November, there will be candidates who the community, Precinct 1, will have the opportunity to select the board member to represent them. So I want to make sure we are extremely cautious, so that we aren't influencing that election by this appointment. To the best of our ability, not to. Let's make sure we're being very careful about that. And I will take continued comments. I want to make sure, Sam.
So I feel very flexible about this, and I think that what might be best for Melissa and Nate to have would be some very clear direction. So I think it might actually be good for us to move this to action so we can motion very specifically and give you clear direction. Would that be helpful for you?
It would certainly be helpful for me to know exactly what the will of the board is on this, so that I'm not making that decision for you all.
And Sam, before you potentially make a motion, just to add to the conversation, and maybe hopefully not throwing too much of a heartache into the conversation, but maybe we should think about some specific categories, like if it is board priorities, Rose Park in the community is very diverse, right? So maybe having some discussion around or questions around diversity and equity be important. And maybe just kind of narrowing it down to a few categories of additional questions might be helpful too. But again, I would be happy to talk about it more in the action portion of the agenda too.
Can I just say one thing and then I'll defer to Mike?
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, Nate, and I think we could conceivably just hash it out in the discussion once we move it to action. My other big concern that I didn't voice is just that we give you clear direction about the threshold for which, if we have, say 3 more people, or I mean, to me, if we have 10 people, then we ought to just scale it back to what we did, or what you all did last year with when I applied, just for the sake of time, so that it doesn't go on and on and on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Mike's going to speak, Christy, and then you. Mike, speak into the microphone so we can hear you.
You can hear me now? You hear me?
Yep.
Okay, a couple things. First off, you gotta remember, whenever you ask them, you have to ask everybody the same question. One way or another, because I'm pretty sure the law says that. Secondly, I think we ought to give the applicants the right to come in here in the boardroom if they want to come in. Just give them the option. I think someone would want to come in and they want to meet someone.
So Mike, let me repeat to make sure I heard you correctly. You're confirming that yes, like what we've been talking about is that we do need to ask everybody the same, every candidate will get the same questions out of fairness, but also that's what we're trying to, we need to follow that just out of fairness. So every candidate would get the same questions. Then what you're suggesting is that we give candidates the ability, if they choose, to come to the district office to do the interview, just as an option if they want to be there in person.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that addition, Mike. I appreciate it. And then, Christy, you had your hand up.
So this is more of a process question. I think that one of the things that I would like us to try and do is to hash all of this out now, instead of us making a motion, moving it to action, and then having another long conversation under action. So to have a better idea of what it is that we really want to move to action, instead of just saying, let's move the topic to action and then hash it out even more in that, in that discussion. Because most times when you think about the process, you want to have the discussion during the discussion time, figure out exactly what you want it to be, and then you move that to action, and then it's just an easy conversation in the action piece. So I think if we want to try and talk as a board right now of what kind of direction that would look like, then form that motion to move it to action would just help us with the process.
I think that's what we're looking for, Christy. I think that's exactly what we're looking for. But I'm not hearing true consensus here. So that's why you hear the hesitation from me. So I think we need to continue to talk about it, whether it's now or on action. But I take your input. Let's try and hash it out now. I think that's important. One thing I can add, as you're kind of thinking through some things right now, is we will have the county clerk, not Sherry Swenson, but Lainey Chapman will participate in our meeting by video to swear in the candidate that we choose at the end of the meeting. That's something that they can do because of the pandemic, so they can do it by video, and then sign the documents electronically, and then send certificates through the mail. And so that will happen on May 5th. And it's a lot to ask of us to do. It's a lot of us to ask of candidates to do. I do feel like it's important that we have our 7th board member as soon as possible. I think this is a good opportunity for me to say I've felt it this week. I miss Tiffany. I miss having the 7 board members, there's strength that comes with that. And so I know I'm asking a lot of us, and we're going to be, I'm asking a lot of us for the next 2 months, really, and always. But I appreciate that. As it will go, we will call the candidates to interview, and they will do the interviews, and we will score them. And then we're working on a process to collect your scores and tally them. And then we'll bring that back toward the end of the meeting for the discussion and appointment of the new board member, selection of the new board member. And then toward the very end of the meeting, we will swear that candidate in electronically. Does that sound fair as a process to you all? It's a lot, I know, but thank you. Nate?
Yeah, I appreciate that too, and certainly all the thought that everybody's put into the discussion. Just to, if it is, and I would certainly appreciate just a little more direction too, speaking from the leadership side of things. I would request and see what the temperature is on us picking 3 categories that we might want to ask. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I'm mostly just thinking about, if we each submit a question, that's an additional 7 questions to each interview, which is fine in many ways. But I think just creating some continuity amongst us as a board to identify 3 key areas, and maybe it's something as simple as board priorities. I would support a question around equity, and maybe the third question is something around, what type of, questions might you have for us, or it would be something specific to weigh in on some of the work that we're doing right now, if it involves any of the things that we're working on, and that might give us a sense of how much folks are paying attention to the work that we are doing. So I would certainly encourage us to think about 3 categories. I think that's a fair number of questions to add to what we already have, based on how the process went last time.
Christy and Sam?
I'm going to agree with Nate. And so I think that having, specific categories, I don't think any more than 3. I think that, talking about board priorities, an equity question, and I would even say, financial goals, that is, another area. But if we're going to submit questions, I would like it to be under, some sort of an umbrella. And, and maybe it's, we leave it open to 1 to 2 questions.
I think we should know what those questions are. I mean, I would be interested in knowing why they would want to be on the board, why they're even considering it. I mean, that doesn't, we don't necessarily get to that in any of the 4 questions that we asked last time, and that we heard it from most candidates. I think most candidates share it, but I think it would be interesting for me to hear what their connection is to it, why they're interested. And Catherine, then Sam. Catherine, go ahead.
Okay, Sam, I think Sam was before me, but is that okay? Okay. So I agree with categories. I think it'd be interesting to hear what they think about board priorities. We could indicate, what do you think about the board goals of education? And we could give them some specifics, and that might truly be Nate's middle of the road, in that. What do you, we could ask, what do you think of the board's priorities? Specifically our focus on excellence and equity, our focus on literacy and social and emotional goals, and the board's recent goal to implement Late Start. I think that we would give them some place to go with that. And I think that might be indeed the middle of the road way to talk about it. I do think, just to follow up, I haven't followed up since I first contributed, but I do think that we spent a lot of time talking about Late Start, and it was a major piece of work and focus for our board for the first 2 months this year, until we started dealing with coronavirus. And I would be interested in seeing how they would carry that forward. We've had that a little bit on pause, but of course we'll want to get the task force going again sometime. And moving forward with that process that we voted on to start in fall 2021. So, I'd be interested in that. I like the categories that Christy set forth. I think we might be able to, I like very much like the question that you said, Melissa. I do think it's an interesting question because it's a temporary question and temporary situation for this person. And I think we might be able to get rid of our very last question that we asked before and maybe incorporate these new questions. And I think we should keep it at 6 questions. 6, maybe 7 questions. I agree that we shouldn't each add a question. I do think that last time around, I felt the questions were very, very open, and in some cases, I think this was a disadvantage to the people applying. I think we got absolutely the right candidate, but I think that sometimes people had a harder time answering those. So I think some more specific questions might be useful for us to get a good sense of the candidate and his or her goals. Thanks.
The questions were specifically open to kind of elicit that broad conversation. And I think what I'm hearing you say, Catherine, is a combination of some of the broad and some with some specificity as well.
Exactly. That was
Okay.
not meant as a criticism of the questions.
No, I know.
So-
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm kind of capturing
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
And while I'm going to turn the time to Sam because he did have his hand raised, but be thinking about this comment. I'm intrigued by just to maybe look at question number 4, which is if this were an election year and you are a candidate for the Board of Education, what would your key message be to your constituency? Maybe that is a question we just don't ask, rather than rewording it to be more, a little less specific to if you are like what your campaign message would be, because this is a 7-month position or 7-month
That's right.
position.
I suggest
we do away with that question altogether and add in one of these other questions on board priorities. Maybe if I like the categories that you guys are talking about: financial, board priorities, and diversity/equity. But we wouldn't want to frame those questions. So that ends up if we drop 4. So we only have 3 questions that we asked last time, and we add 3 categories, that's 6 questions. Then we can process it similarly, where each board member asks a question, and we take feedback, and then we score those. You'll each have a rubric. You ask the questions, take your notes, and you give them a score, basically, and then we'll take that feedback. Does that sound like we're kind of getting down to something that we can all agree with? 6 questions, 3 that we have. And I'm sorry, Sam, you had your hand raised before I started. Go ahead.
Go finish what you were saying. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I was just maybe getting excited that we were getting close to a point where it looked like maybe 6 questions was where we were headed. Like
You're saying the original 4 minus
yes,
plus an equity question, a question on board priorities, and a question on finance.
General, Christy kind of threw it out there as a broad kind of how they would look at district finances, or maybe that would be a good way of getting at the COVID conversation too, but that would be something in that question.
Can I speak to that? I wouldn't want us to exclude someone that was highly engaged at their school or in their schools, plural, if they have, kids at multiple schools, if they're a parent. Not that you have to be a parent. I'm not a parent, obviously. But, I wouldn't want to exclude someone based on the fact that they hadn't been following the board over the last year really closely, if they were super engaged in their community. So I would say maybe it's possible to say that people could. What if we rolled finance and literacy into one, or finance and board goals of literacy and SEL into one? And then if they wanted to talk, if they had some special financial acumen that they wanted to talk about, they could do that, or they could talk about our board goals. And if they had been following the board really closely, they could talk about stuff that we've been talking about, like Late Start, but they wouldn't have to. But they could talk about, SEL. You might not know what the acronym means, but it's something that I think is pretty universal in terms of being something that people would be concerned about, that social and emotional health, mental health happening at their school, and literacy happening at their school. So,
Obviously, it would matter how the question was worded.
yeah, that
Right. And I'm with you, Sam. I don't think we want to do anything that prevents really engaged community members from participating on our board. You certainly get a lot of information and get expertise quickly once you're on the board, as you well know. But we're not expecting that from our candidates at this point. They'll learn that as they go, and I want to support that. But how we word the questions then would really matter for what you're talking about.
Let me posit something, and I could even make it a motion if people are amenable to it. So what if we did, above and beyond the 3 old questions, a question on equity? What could we be doing to better serve our mission of excellence and equity? A question on what could we as a board be doing to better serve your precinct, or precinct 1 in this case?
So we do ask, what is the greatest
Yeah.
educational needs of your precinct? So that is there.
And we ask, what are the challenges facing the district?
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, the more I think about it, the more I think we should just leave it the way it is.
Yeah, there's value in that. These were good questions. They're broad, but we could. I would still suggest that we maybe change question 4, which is about a campaign. If you were a candidate, what would your key message be? But we could certainly ask it in what's your highest priority. I mean, that's essentially what that question's asking.
Maybe it should just be something as broad as what should the board's greatest priority for the district be over the next 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Even though they'll only be a board member for 7 months, they just kind of get what their highest priority is.
Ask them for a year and for 5 years. I mean, that could be an interesting opportunity for them to answer differently.
Yeah. Christy, I see you wanting, sorry, you keep leaning forward and it looks like you want to say something.
So last year, when we asked that question, as a part of all of the people that came and applied, we asked that question to everybody about the campaign. And so I'm not as uncomfortable with it, and I'm tending to go back towards, let's just stick with the questions, that we had, instead of trying to go down this pathway of categories now. So I thought we were kind of, anyway.
I know.
I to tell you honestly, I would like us just to stick with the 4 questions that we have.
Okay, so Christy's with the 4.
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
Sam?
I'm going to go ahead and motion that we stick with our 4 questions and that we conduct these interviews remotely.
Okay, so you would say no option for them to come to the.
And move that to action.
Okay, so we would need that motion first, but that would be following kind of Christy's advice to us. So if everybody's pretty good with that, we can move that to action.
Yeah. So if Sam just motioned, I will second.
Okay. We have a motion to move this to action, and we have a second from Christy. So we're voting. Any comments on that?
You okay moving it to action?
Okay, Mike. Oh, we've got some discussion. Catherine, go ahead.
So I'm okay with that proposal. That's fine if we want to stay with those 4 questions. I I suggest that when we move something to action, can we go straight to the action and and go, or do we have to go to an action agenda? Because I agree with Christy that we have to get back into it. I mean, I'd rather just move it to action and then act.
Okay, let's do that, especially because we have quite a long list of discussion items tonight.
Okay.
So I'm happy to do that.
And
Thank
are
you.
we, okay, all right, that's fine.
So right now we're just voting on the motion to move it to action. And so I'll start with Mike. How do you feel about moving this to action, Mike?
What are we moving to action? Same thing we used last time?
Yes.
Just these questions about how to
I
interview.
vote yes, we just leave them alone.
Yes.
The motion right now is just to move it to action. Conversation is about probably just leaving these questions as we asked them last. But the motion is just about moving it to action. So yes to move to action from Mike. Catherine?
Yes.
Nate?
Nate Salazar, yes.
Sam?
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so we're moving that to action. And then based on the conversation, we're going to address this action as an action item right now. So do I have a motion for this topic of the interview, the process for the new board member interviews?
I move that we keep the same 4 questions that we used last time and that we do the interviews remotely. Otherwise, we will be in violation of the governor's 10 persons or fewer order.
I'll
Request.
second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Christy. And the motion is that we use the same questions that we used a year ago, same 4 questions, and that we hold the interviews remotely. Let's go ahead and vote on that. Starting with Mike.
Mr. Namalka, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
And Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes. Okay. So back to our discussion agenda. But first, I just want to say thank you all for that conversation. I think we were all over the place, but I really appreciated the thought everybody brought to the conversation and the ability to make a decision on that. So thank you. The next item on our discussion agenda is the land trust plan discussion. And I'm going to turn to you, Lexi, to give us.
Okay.
Thanks for the glare update. Sorry about that.
All right.
You can tell I'm not looking at myself enough. Is that better? Okay. Go ahead, Lexi.
We do have some schools that feel that their land trust plans are in really good shape. And they would like to bring those to the board to vote on at our next meeting on May 5th, so they can be submitted by the 15th. And then those schools that don't feel that their plans are ready or they'd like more time to examine, we will bring those to you the first part of September, so those can be voted on by September 15th and submitted. We do have an extension this year for land trust. We are very comfortable bringing 2 sets of land trust plans, one now for the schools that are ready, and then again in September.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Lexi. I appreciate that update and that flexibility. We've had assurances that for plans that are submitted in September and maybe not funded until late fall, that the district will be able to support
Absolutely.
those plans if they're paying for salaries, etc. I think that flexibility is good. And board members, that means we'll have some plans to review, but the plans that would be submitted by our next board meeting, which is next Tuesday, our plans you've already seen, most likely. If they're at the point where they're mostly ready to be voted on, we've got them all already because Lexi had them delivered to our house. So they're probably not substantially different. It probably won't be a lot of reading on your part. Sam, you have a question about
I
that?
would, I was just going to say that that echoes what I've been hearing from my schools. And so then my question would be, can we go ahead and start submitting our cover sheets to you, Dr. Copeland?
Yes, if you can scan those to me, or you can drop them off, or I can pick them up, I'd be happy to. What I've been doing is as I get them, I scan them in and send them to the principals. So most definitely, I'll take whatever feedback you have, I'll take it.
Okay, I'll scan those and get them to you in the
Okay.
next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Should we be reviewing all the plans? That's a good question then. Do you want us reviewing them all, or do you want us just to the ones that we hear from that are going to be submitted on the May timeline?
I think that from the original packet that you got, your assignments were there. You
Right.
can definitely review those. And then as you see the ones that are submitted for the next board meeting, most definitely take a look at those. I don't
Okay.
think we're going to see much difference from the schools that are ready to submit now from what they submitted to you earlier this spring.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Sam?
Do we need to assign somebody to do the ones that Tiffany was assigned?
I think that a lot of people there were several sets of eyes were on them, so I think that
Okay.
I think it'll be okay.
Okay.
It
Great.
will be definitely, but I'm happy to review. There were 2 reviewers on every plan, and I'll go through and look and see. I don't think there were many that Tiffany and I were, if any, that we were the 2 on. So I'll go through and make sure I've at least checked the boxes because I've read them all, so I can go back and check. But yeah, I think that there's like Lexi said, lots of eyes have been on these already. If they're ready to go, they've already been reviewed by their SECs and approved, and so our eyes on them is important as well. So that, I don't think there's anything that needs to be moved for action for that if we're happy with where we are at for that.
No, I just wanted you to know that we're going to bring 2 sets. That was the only thing.
I think that that's great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that update on feedback. All right. The next thing I have on here for discussion is something we've talked about as a board before, sending out a message, writing an op-ed piece about, I mean, at this point, it would just need to be a discussion from the board. If we want to put out something as a board about some things that we're up to, things we're moving forward. I think at this point, I'm just really looking for, is this something the board is interested in? And I'll open that up for discussion.
Melissa, I'll go ahead and weigh in. I think this is something that we should consider. I'm not sure if I'm prepared to talk about specific topics other than just an update, of where we're at. Obviously we have the pandemic that we're managing. School's not going to be back in session. I think just forecasting, the district and that we're moving forward with our initiatives, with our budget, looking at plans for graduation. I mean, I'm just throwing out some ideas, and these all don't have to be on there, but I think the general message should be something, along the lines of us continuing the work of the district, and that we're moving forward in a good and positive way.
A positive message about the work of the board, and you would say putting together an op-ed with the help of Yandri would be a good idea.
I would support that. Yes.
Okay. Any other feedback on that? Mike, do you have any opinions about that?
No, he does not.
Okay. Catherine? Are you interested in me pursuing something like that?
Yes, I am. And I would say that I think it's a really great idea for us to talk about what our goals are and what we've been doing, and a really great way for us to communicate with our constituents and our employees and people, talk to people about what we think is important, and thank people again.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, my thoughts on it have been that it would be sort of a positive message from all of us about the things that are happening and what we see, kind of what Catherine and Nate have talked. We've approached this already from letters that Sam really graciously wrote. I think this would be a way to have a broader audience too, as well. Just a continuing that continued message, I think, is valuable. But let's see, Sam, you have something you'd like to add to this, like your opinion on if you think you'd like to go ahead with this?
Yeah, I think it's always good to communicate and, talk to our public about what we're dealing with right now, but also what the ramifications long term might be for our financial situation. Excuse me.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Okay. Christy, do you have something you'd like to add to this?
So I'm probably going to take a different approach then. Instead of looking at an op-ed, I would like us to consider actually sending out information to Salt Lake City residents. I think that that's where it's more important, that putting it in the Salt Lake Tribune or in the Deseret News, that that's going to be broad-based. And for me, it's more about letting our residents, our constituents, our taxpayers here in Salt Lake City know what's going on with Salt Lake District. So I think that for me, what I would like us to consider is not an op-ed in the paper, but to put together a really thoughtful letter that can go into our residents' home, not just our parents, but the residents of Salt Lake City School District, Salt Lake City. And because there's questions, all ages, all people of all ages, sorry, are asking me, questions. And so I would just phrase it as our taxpayers, and I think that to me, that has more value.
Well, I hear that. I think it might be a comment. Maybe we could do both too, but just thinking. Let's see now, circling back, I see Catherine's hand.
I like what Christy is saying about the more targeted audience. I think that's right. When we were talking about op-ed, I wasn't really thinking about papers. I was thinking more about a communication we could send, we could put on our website. Along with that, when people were talking, I think that we should talk about our goals, and I think we should talk very specifically about how the legislature will impact what kind of funding we can give to our teachers, for example. I mean, I think people should know that the legislature, that we should be very clear about the fact that the legislature provides us the money for us to do, to educate students, to pay teachers, and to do the things that we can do. And so I think we should be very specific about that, very specific maybe about the fact that we would like to see the legislature keep their 6% that they designated to us. So, I mean, maybe it should be an update about what we're doing, but maybe it should be a little bit political too.
Mm-hmm.
And I like this thing. And
I see nods. Yeah. My goal has just been communication from the board to our, the people we serve. So I'm really open to however that happens on a more regular basis. I'd like to see that happen.
Melissa,
Nate, sorry I cut you off.
Oh, no worries. It's all good. And just to dovetail on Catherine's suggestion about getting a little more political, it just kind of leads me to think that maybe we should consider doing both in the sense that, the letter to the community and individual residents is something that's much more personal. Certainly has much more detail relative to the work of the district and the board and what we're doing now. And maybe, the opinion piece and op-ed could be very specific in kind of putting the word out there about what we're thinking and advocating for to the community before this next legislative session, where we'll have a very good understanding about WPU. It might be something that, and I'm not sure if SLEA leadership is at the district office tonight, but maybe it's something that could be a joint op-ed piece, relative to the impact that WPU can have on teacher salaries.
A joint piece with our SLEA, SLASA, with our class of, with all of our employee groups. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, and not 100% sold on it, but would love to hear
Just
what
an
people's
idea,
thoughts on
just
that.
brainstorming. No, I appreciate that we're having a conversation. Thanks, Nate. Do I have any other? What if we worked on a draft and I emailed you a draft? We could talk about this again next week. Are we able to do that, or do we? Yeah.
I like that, Melissa.
I think that's fine.
Mr. Namelka has something to say.
You ready?
Yeah, they're ready.
Leave my name off it, because I agree with Tiffany, I don't like the direction this board's going. And I don't want to feed the people of Salt Lake City a bunch of BS, so leave my name off it.
Okay, Mike, what if we did a draft and you could look at it and see if you support it before you make that decision?
Thanks.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mike, I wish I could hear you better.
I said no thanks.
Okay, all right.
Everybody out here, and let them know what I feel. You all know I'm running again, and I wasn't gonna do it again, but I'm gonna do it. We'll see what happens.
Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, so I have maybe some general support for at least looking at a draft of something we might send out, and without Mike Namelka's participation. How is everybody else feeling about this? Yes, we don't have to do it. It doesn't. We're not deciding today to do anything. We're just having a conversation about what we might look at what it would look like if if Yandri and I were to work on a draft. I don't want to give me a thumbs up on that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. We'll move on to the next discussion item, which is it's just on here because this was requested at our last board meeting. It's the paraprofessional salaries. So I'm not exactly sure where to take with this. You guys have an update thanks to that Janet put together and Lexi sent out on what it would cost to do the paraprofessional salaries. I think based on some of the conversation I've heard tonight in this portion of the meeting about caution, I would just start the conversation by having that be something we've got in our minds, but I'll open the conversation to people to discuss. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thanks, Melissa. I think that in light of the conversation that's happened over the past 2 weeks since our last board meeting, that the uncertainty of what is happening at the legislature in regards to the weighted pupil unit, and not only that, but possibly other line items in the budget, that the conversation just needs to be put on hold. And knowing that the board has created a list of budget priorities that we're interested in, but yet to make any kind of a commitment at this point would be foolhardy for us to do that. And I think that we need to wait and see what our budget's going to look like, and then at that point we can come back and have that discussion. And I will just say that for me personally, when I misunderstood the legislature when they were saying, you know, don't plan on, that your budget should just be as it is, as it was last year. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, that means they're just going to go ahead and give us the same amount of money that they gave us last year. But actually, that's not what they're saying. And so I think that we just need to make that clear. And as we have this conversation as a board and with our public and, with our employee groups, that they know that we value them and they are a priority to us. But at this point, everything's uncertain about our state budget. And unfortunately, that does have an impact on how we prioritize.
Thanks for that feedback, Christy. I appreciate that. Does anybody want to add to that? Go ahead, Catherine.
I just want to say that I agree with Christy that I'm, concerned about where the legislature is going right now. And Christy and I have been on that, on the JLC team assigned to that. And I know Sam has come a lot to the JLC as much as any of us, as a matter of fact. And I'd like to hear his comments too. But I also feel like Christy has used the right phrases, definitely, that it would be imprudent and even foolhardy for us to proceed without knowing what kind of funding we'll get from the legislature this year, especially with what they've indicated. So I really agree with her and I appreciate her leadership on this.
Thank you, Catherine. Sam, do you want to speak to that or you're just agreeing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you both said. I think we're just in a time where we have to wait and see, unfortunately. I know there's a strong appetite on the board to raise hourly wages for our paraprofessionals and to really get my strong desire would be to really get all of our paras to the same level and then give them a raise or give their supervisors the ability to give them a raise on a scale along the same lines that certain other employees are afforded raises year to year. If you look at that salary schedule, I think it's salary schedule 86 on our website. It shows you paraprofessionals are locked in at 15 and 1550 for paraprofessionals that work with special ed students. And then we have a lot of people that are also in the classroom or in school, student advocates and it's teaching assistants, and there are different names, but these are people in the classroom who are making even less than that. And I think I speak for everyone when I say we want to raise those salaries to something closer to a living wage. So we will hope that we do better this year than it seems like we might at the legislature.
But we don't know where we're at yet, so it's hard to make decisions based on we don't have the information yet. We're waiting. That's what I'm hearing. That's how I feel. Any other comments? Nate, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I would love to. And I think that we should trust board members Kennedy and Sweat with the participation that they have in their leadership roles with the state board and certainly just wait till we can put together a package of what we know we have coming to us from the state, if anything at all. But I would just certainly emphasize that I think the op-ed is a good opportunity for us to let our community and employees in our district know that we're thinking about them and that we're just waiting until we have more information from the legislature before moving some of these things forward.
Okay, Mr. Nemelka, would you like to weigh in on this discussion item?
Sure would. Ready? None of us are old enough to remember what it was like during the Depression, but I remember my parents talking about it. They reduced salaries way down low, but when they had adequate funds, they raised them. We had that $6 million sold it away 3 years ago to do exactly, give them a raise or something. Why you keep arguing about it is beyond me. It has nothing to do with the legislature. We already have that money. Give them the money and quit arguing about it. That's all I got to say.
Thanks for that feedback, Mike. I don't feel like we're arguing. I actually feel like what we're saying is these are things that we've set as priorities, and we would like to just be careful about how we implement them, given what we don't know right now. I think if we had a little more solid footing, that's what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling from the board. If we felt like we had more solid footing on where the legislature is going with how they're funding, because that's where our money comes from, a lot of it comes from, then we can plan better. And so I think the message needs to be the things that we've prioritized, we still prioritize. Nothing's changed in that way. It's just we're gonna look carefully about how we fund it, and how we make those things happen. Those are still things that we want to see happen. I hope I'm reflecting the conversation I'm hearing from the board, which I don't feel like has been an argument. I feel like for the most part, we agree. These are things we want to do, and we just want to do it in a way that's sustainable. Is that a fair summary of where we're at? If it is, let's go ahead and move to the next discussion item, which is the graduation ceremony recommendation. And I know that this is something that we're all hearing a lot about. We have a lot of our friends and neighbors with high school seniors who are thinking a lot about graduation. And I know that Lexi's been working really hard on this. And so I'm going to turn the time to Lexi to give us an update about this and what she's looking for from us in terms of a recommendation.
Thank you, Melissa. Each school is working with students right now and doing different things. We've seen online talent shows, we've seen signs in yards, all kinds of different things that our schools are doing. I think that we've got our survey went out today to our senior parents and our seniors themselves. And I think that what the community would like to hear is just that there's hope, maybe later in the summer or even, once school starts, that there'd be an opportunity to pull kids and families together to do some type of graduation and celebration. So our hope would be that as a board, you could reaffirm that this is something that you'd like to do, still leave it up to the schools to plan their ceremonies and their celebrations, but just be really clear to our seniors that there is going to be some type of ceremony and some type of celebration for them, because they just really feel that they've been kind of cheated out of this experience.
So really what it sounds like, I mean, what you'd like from us is to say, yes, we would absolutely plan to celebrate our seniors. It's not going to go unnoticed. Graduation is not canceled. It will not be on the same day we originally had scheduled. It'll potentially be postponed either till later in the summer if that's a possibility, but there will be celebrations that will happen, and there will potentially, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is they'll be as individual probably as the schools that are hosting them. Flixies will certainly look different than West's, for example, but that's okay as long as there's a celebration of those seniors.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think it will go a long way if they know that you've voted on this and that you are supporting seeing some type of graduation ceremony.
Okay. Do we need to be any more specific than that?
I don't think so. I think if you leave it up to the schools, I think they're working right now on plans, but I just think that the message is really strong from this board that that's what you support, and I think that will alleviate a lot of stress.
Okay, Catherine, I see your hand. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell, but so I'm sorry if I'm not getting it right, but I'm trying.
I'm glad to have that feedback from Superintendent Cunningham. And I'm hoping that if there are other comments, because we've invited comments from our community, that we could maybe take a look at those comments. I'd be really interested in those comments, in skimming those comments. I have a college senior, and I know that it's not only graduation or commencement itself that is a loss. And so I would encourage the schools, and I know it'll be up to schools to do it, but I would encourage them to also have a yearbook signing time or an honors award ceremony, maybe another day's worth of activities. So the seniors that, it's not just graduation. I think it's the activities before graduation that are important to these students. And I think that whatever we can do to provide that. The other thing I'd like to suggest is that we let people know that we'll choose a time where our seniors would be available. Some of them may be gone on service missions or things like that, but some of them that are in college, have gone away to college, we want to choose a time that we think that would work for students as a whole. So, it could be at the winter holiday time, winter break time. It could be at, next summer, possibly. We have 2 days of graduation ceremonies, and we'll try to publicize that long in advance so people can make plans if they want to.
And I'm happy to share the survey results when we get them back, because we surveying senior parents and seniors, and there is a comment section if there are ideas that they would like. So we'd be happy to share all that with the board.
That would be great if you'd share that with us. Do you have any other comments from board members about this?
I had a question for you, Dr. Cunningham. Have we heard any updates from Tia Yazi about the Title VI graduation ceremony and of course any other ceremonies that are going on in the community? For example, just through my work at the library, we've been working with West High's Casa Quetzalcoatl program to still coordinate their first generation graduation ceremony in some way, somehow. And I don't know if it'll be anything that's in live. That's really dependent on the folks at Marmalade Library, but just wondering, we have a number of kind of ancillary graduation ceremonies for specific ethnic-based community groups. Wondering if you have any updates on Title VI or any other community that's working at graduation ceremonies right now.
I told them to plan, and I'll use Title VI, like the blankets and the stoles and all of that they need to be ordering those and have those things ready. What we just can't give them right now is a date, but that they should still plan to have those activities. And when we have a date, actually do those in person. If they wanted to do something virtually now, that's okay. But we did say that we really feel that later on, either this summer or early in the fall, there'd be an opportunity to do that. But so we've told them just to plan and get everything that they need. And then we'll look what that celebration looks like once we get more direction from the governor.
Okay, perfect. And then any other thoughts on some Throwback Thursday photos of board members' graduation pictures, just as a sign of solidarity? I think that'd be really fun.
Maybe we can give direction for everybody to submit, every board member to submit one by.
No, Lexi has mine because I saw it in her office one day. We were joking about it when I first started.
I love it. I love it. Christy, I can see your hand. Go ahead.
I think my graduation picture kind of looks a little like Rosanna Dana with my big perm. So
I want to see it.
I don't know. Superintendent, once you start hearing from our schools what those ceremonies or maybe what those plans look like, could you just send that out to us in your memo so that we can, if there's a way for us to, participate, or, I don't know what that would even look like, but, just so that they know that we're also interested in what they're doing and what they're planning. And, I had the other day, my parents from Highland High ask, if some of the other high schools were putting up signs, that signified, who were seniors. And so I think just anything that, it was really great that Catherine told us about the West High signs. I saw that, and I passed that on to my Highland families. So any information that you can give us would be really helpful, that we could also pass along and then in any way participate. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'd be happy to do that. And I think some of these conversations are taking place in SCC meetings, or I hope they are. So hopefully if you're invited to those, which we've asked people to continue to have those meetings, you'll be hearing about them there too.
Yeah, I can confirm that there's a very robust conversation happening at East High in their SCC and throughout the community on ways to support their seniors. And I will also echo what Lexi said at the beginning, which is, I think, direction from us that we support these kinds of celebrations of these seniors will go a long way. That we are gonna take their feedback, that we're gonna support what they're talking about at schools, that we aren't gonna just let this kind of slide by without them having a graduation. I know on a personal note, it was a privilege and a little bit of sadness that I got to watch Josh's basic training graduation online, because they were doing it, every soldier sitting 6 feet apart, and just them in the room. And it's not the same thing as being there in person. And these students have certainly worked hard to reach this point. I definitely feel like we want to celebrate them and support the conversations that they're having at the school on ways to support them. I've seen the signs, East High signs in my neighborhood too, and I know from the East conversation that they're dropping things off at each senior's house. So I think that's great. But if we can look toward actually having a more formal celebration at some point too, that would be great. So I think the only person I haven't heard from is Mike. Do you have something you want to say about this?
Yeah, I support anything they want to do, so long as they'll let us do it, I'd say go for it.
Okay. I think what I'd like to suggest is that we move this to action, and then just take a motion that we support the how would I word that? I think what I'm hearing is support for a senior celebration and postponement of graduation. Based on CDC guidelines, or I don't know how I'd word that, but as we have better direction on when we can gather, that we do look at that as well. Go ahead, Catherine.
So I would move that we phrase it positively. So I would move that we that the Salt Lake City Board of Education supports a commencement at a later time, and we'll work towards achieving this goal, and that we support individual schools efforts as they celebrate their students this spring.
Okay.
And maybe I'd add graduation and related activities. Because I think some students, like I said, are concerned about the loss, not only of graduation, but of other things that are important to their school community.
Activities, so celebrations and activities that still follow safe guidelines this spring. Okay. Does anybody want to move this to action?
I'll second that motion if that was a motion.
So that was a suggestion of what a motion would look like. Yeah. Which was that we support a commencement at a later time and support individual schools in their celebrations and activities that follow safe guidelines and recognizing our graduating seniors. Sam?
We move Catherine's motion to action.
There we go.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. Let's hear a vote on that. Moving it to action. Mike, yes?
Mike, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Sam?
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so now following the pattern we've established at the beginning of this meeting, let's move to action. Let's address it right now. The motion, as I have it written, is that the board supports a commencement at a later time for the class of 2020, and we support the individual schools as in their celebrations and activities to support our high school seniors.
Move to approve.
So yes, let me just say that it was commits to holding a commencement. So really strong language, commits to holding a commencement, our graduation and other related activities, as schools choose for our class of 2020 and supports schools' activities this spring under safe social distancing guidelines.
Okay. Do we have that?
So move to approve with what the additions that Catherine said.
Okay.
Yeah.
With what Catherine said and
Yeah.
okay. All right. Do we have a second? And okay, let's vote on it. Mike?
Yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Awesome. So moved and approved. And so Lexi, you have that motion in that direction. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I think it'll go a long way.
Okay. All right. The next thing on our discussion agenda is the school fee refund. And I'm going to turn the time to Lexi for an update on this.
Since we've been out of school 1 week of third quarter and all of fourth quarter, we really feel that there are a lot of students that have paid fees for a number of different things, and we should begin the process of beginning to refund those fees for the fourth quarter. We may not be able to get to all of it this spring, but we can continue it in the summer and into the next fall, and we'd like to give families an opportunity to either apply the money to fees next year or actually get a refund. We just think that that is the right thing to do. A lot of our students have not been able to participate in activities that those fees were to cover.
Okay, I thank you for that, Lexi. I would like to hear how the board feels about that and potentially just move that to action, or maybe we don't even need to if we feel that strongly about it in this conversation. But I personally would like to support that work to refund fees. You can talk.
Melissa, I would also support that, and I think I would support just because it is of a financial nature that we do go through a formal
action.
process.
Okay. All right. So I hear you, Mike, that you agree with that you agree that we should do the refunds on fees. And
he just said so, and he just said he'd like to start with the seniors.
That's a good idea. Thanks, Mike. Any other comments on that, or should we move that to action? Do I have a motion?
I move we move this to action.
Second. Okay. All right, let's vote on it. Moving this to action. Mike?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so we've moved this to action. The school fee refund is now on our action agenda, which we will address right now. Do I have a motion?
I move we refund
Okay.
school fees for this final term, as Melka suggested, beginning with our seniors.
I second.
So we have a motion by Sam and Krista, seconded by Christy, that we begin the process of refunding fees from fourth quarter and for the time of the soft closure, beginning with our graduating seniors.
And that we follow Superintendent Cunningham's recommendation to allow families to apply that next year if they wish.
Yes, I would add, that's great. I would add that too. Christy?
So I just want to thank everyone for this conversation. I think that it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also very timely. I know that, when we collect these fees, we collect them at the beginning of the year. And it's very possible that some of those fees have either already been spent or hopefully, they're still in reserve. And so looking at our seniors first and then going down from there. And then also, as Catherine just said, possibly our lower classmen, our younger classmen being able to apply it to next year would just be so helpful. So thank you for the thoughtful conversation, and I appreciate everyone's input.
Thanks, Christy. Any other discussion to this motion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. Mike, are you in favor of this motion?
Yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, let's do it. That's great. Thank you. Thank you all for these conversations. I do appreciate that. The next item for discussion on our agenda is the Salt Lake Education Association priorities. Again, it's here based on our last board conversation. So perhaps the conversation will be very similar to the conversation we had about paraprofessionals in terms of what we don't yet know from the financial situation with the legislature and because of the pandemic. But here it is, and so I'll open it up to the board for conversation, and just would like to take just my own personal point of privilege. I've really been appreciative of the thoughtfulness you have brought to these conversations this evening already. So with that, do you any more comments from board members on this subject?
Thanks, Melissa. I would agree with you that I think it's very similar to the conversation we just had about paras. Not a minimization of the hard work and the requests of our teachers and their organization, but certainly just us being more mindful about what we have coming to us through the legislature.
I would like to add that board members have seen the priorities from SLEA. We haven't yet seen priorities from our other associations, but we have looked at them and we are looking at a process for discussing that. Something we're thinking about, certainly. And I think it's important that these are things that are on our minds and that we're working on. Any other comments, Sam?
I just wanted to say that I've appreciated the opportunity over the last week or so to talk over email with a lot of our teachers, and appreciated the detailed letters that many of them wrote, and then when I responded with questions, several people wrote back. I think it was just very productive for me to hear how those individual voices have shaped these priorities from SLEA. And it was good for me to have a chance to review our salary schedule and notice things about it that I think we've talked about in the past, but that I think are worth talking about a little now. We have a salary schedule that starts slightly lower than other districts in the valley, but if you stay in our district for 8 or 9 years, you end up making more money than you do at any other school district in the valley. And that's not at all to say that we don't want to do better for our teachers when we have the money to do that. But I think it's a reflection of our values, and it's good. It was good for me to hear that a lot of people think that that's the right call still, to keep the kind of slope of it where it is. And so I appreciated everyone that wrote to me. I appreciated hearing from, but particularly those who got into the details and talked about those kind of specific issues with me. So I hope we can continue to keep those lines of communication open.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Sam. I likewise, I'll echo that. I've appreciated hearing from people on this and hope to continue to. Christy?
I want to echo a little bit of what everyone's been saying. I think that some of the emails that I've been getting have just been so thoughtful and very supportive. And I've loved that I'm hearing specifically, from a lot of teachers that are in my precinct, and I've been very touched, by the personal stories that have been shared with me. And I've tried to answer back to as many of them as possible. One of the things that over my time on the board, I have spent so much time, whether it was with our own SLEA leadership or at the state level, advocating for our teachers at the state legislature and also, at the national level. And as a parent, and I think all of you, who have children who have gone through the system who are still there, know the importance of a teacher and how they shape and form our children. And that should be appreciated and not targeted. And it's unfortunate that the conversation over the years in our state has been more negative than it has been positive. And so I appreciate the effort that this board is going to make. I appreciate the leadership that we have that continually reminds us that every single day, doesn't matter what's happening in our lives, that our teachers are there waiting for our kids to come through the door and provide them with the best educational experience that they could possibly get. And I think we're very fortunate to have some of the most incredible teachers in the state, right in Salt Lake City School District. And so, publicly, I just want to say thank you to all of them that wrote to me, that shared their stories with me, and how much I appreciated the thoughtfulness and the care that they have taken with this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that, Christy. I would say that this experience with the COVID-19 pandemic and our soft closure of schools has really highlighted for me the importance of the adults we have working in our district, in particular our teachers. We can't, you just can't even ever overstate the value of a highly trained educator in the life of a student on that face-to-face personal interaction. It's only served to cement something that I already knew, how important those individuals are in the lives of our students. So I would echo that for sure, and know that I appreciate that it's something that I think every person on this board really values, and previous boards have set as priority as well. Catherine, I'll let you. I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to echo what you've said and what Christy said really beautifully, and Sam said, and say that I know that this is a priority for us. I hope that we'll return to this, and that we can continue to work with the legislature and address the legislature and tell them how important it is for them to adequately fund our schools and our teachers' salaries. And I really appreciated the teachers that I heard from. Again, like Christy said, many passionate comments, and I appreciated Sam's follow-up, and I followed up with teachers as well, and was really interested to hear their replies, and really enjoyed the conversations, and really want them to know how they're valued and how much we appreciate them. I really want them to know that they are very meaningful, and that the phrase that I heard often, which was to attract and retrain, or to teachers to our schools, is really important to us, and that that's why we're the highest paying school district over the length of a career, and that our goal would be to also be the highest starting salary if we can do that. But at the same time, we have to be fiscally responsible, and we look to the legislature for that funding, and really want to get that funding for our teachers. So we'll continue to work really hard, and I appreciated the teachers showing up at the lobbying effort at the legislature last February, and being there with them and trying to act in concert with them for a goal that I think is really important.
Thank you, Catherine. Any other comments? All right. Thank you for these conversations. Let's move on to number 8 on our discussion agenda, which is the superintendent and business administrator search. As you hopefully have seen, the business administrator job is posted. It's on our district webpage. It's also on USBA's website. It's posted in other job postings around the state. Richard Stoll is leading that search. I appreciated the feedback you all gave to me on that job posting. I think it looks really good, and I hope that you can see how your feedback was included in that job posting. It's a thoughtful process. I'm grateful to the help and support I've received from Lexi on that as well. It's a daunting process, but we do need to talk a little bit about the timeline for that. And so in some ways, this conversation will mesh into the next item on our discussion, which is for more board meetings. I don't know if I sent you the recommendation. I think maybe an email I sent you a recommendation that Richard Stoll gave me. If I haven't done that yet, I apologize, but potentially 3 additional board meetings to look at, to screen applications, to interview applicants, and to make a decision on our business administrator. The job posting closes on May 18th. We have a board meeting scheduled for May 19th. We will talk about the specifics of the meeting schedule after this discussion, but I just want to hear from you about your availability and willingness to have those extra meetings. It would be, I think, potentially 3 meetings. And then, yeah, let's have a discussion about that for right now. Let me hear what you're thinking. Sam?
I'm more than happy to have some extra meetings to deal with our business administrator search. I'm wondering if you might also outline what recommendations Richard might have in terms of, or what we're thinking in terms of a timeline for appointing an interim superintendent.
So I think we do need to talk about that as a group, but I was hoping to focus first on this and then on that, if that's okay.
That's fine. So I would say more meetings. We could meet every Tuesday till July, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we may need to have that. We're certainly kind of stepping up meetings already with a meeting next week. The recommendation from Richard is sometime the week the job posting closes that we have a meeting all together to screen the applications together. And that could take a couple of hours depending on how many applications we have, and narrowing it down in that meeting to who we'd like to interview. And then Richard would set up interviews for us the following week. So the week of March 25th, May 25th would be an interview time, and then we would want to do reference and checks and background check, which Richard would do, but we would want to participate. I would think. I mean, I'll take direction on that, on checking references, and then we would want to have a meeting to discuss the candidates and make a decision. That's why I'm recommending potentially 3 in a row, and probably not on the nights of our already previously scheduled board meetings, because we will have other board work to do on the 19th and June 2nd. Christy?
I'm hoping that, as I think back on the process we went through with the superintendent search, that if we could do back-to-back meetings, versus spreading them out, if that was a possibility. I know there were several times that, we looked at a couple of hours on one day, a couple of hours the next day, if that was a possibility instead of, because obviously we're in a time crunch anyway. So I'm assuming that's what you're thinking, is
Right.
that it would be back-to-back meetings.
Yeah, I think you'll notice I haven't specifically said dates yet.
Right.
Because I want to take board direction on that and be sensitive to
Right.
your schedules.
Right. Well, and I think that we do need to be sensitive because we've got, some of us are still committed, with work schedules and, other things. So, um, I mean, obviously, I think that that's probably the way we're going to have to proceed. And I don't think we really have a choice. So
No, and
we have to move forward.
I think we can do this very effectively in 3 meetings. It's just a matter of when we want to schedule them. And really, I'd take feedback on that if you think we need more too, or how we schedule that. I think we need probably a 4 or 5 hour meeting to screen applications. The things we've asked for in the application, there's a lot for us to read through, and I think we need to commit to reading them. And then we need to decide who we want to interview. And an interview per candidate will probably take 45 minutes at least. We need to schedule a 45-minute interview at least, and those will be public. We'll do those interviews publicly like this with we're going to have to figure out exactly how to do that by video conference, but they will be public, and then we'll have a meeting to discuss that, and potentially, depends on how the process goes, potentially we'll want to do second interviews, and potentially we'll want a little bit of time, I think, in between the interviews and the decision to do some reference calling and things like that. Another option, and I'll just throw it out there, is to put together a subcommittee of the board to do some of that screening and some of those reference calling. We can do it all together in noticed meetings, which is kind of how I've put it out there, but it's also certainly possible to be done in a subcommittee as well. So I hope you can hear that I'm trying to leave it as open as possible within the time frame we've got, so that we can do it in a process that's comfortable for all of you and schedules work for all of us, but so that we give it the time it requires to do it well.
Melissa, I'll go ahead and jump in
Please.
and say that I would support having additional meetings. I do like the idea of doing the back-to-back if schedules permit, in the sense that it just creates more continuity, so you're not having to look back at your notes from the last week. And I don't know, I think it keeps things present in front of mind, to be able to think about it that way. Just for me personally, who's still working and has a work schedule, I think as long as meetings are scheduled, after 4:30 or 4, I should be able to make just about any evening throughout the work week. So I would just put that out there.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think you lay out a good strategy, and I think it's good that you brought up, the question of doing this as a group versus doing it as a subcommittee. I think we should do it as a group. I think it would be good for us to do it as a group, even if it's a little more work.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead, Catherine.
Sam, I think it will be a good way to integrate our new board member, and that we should, think about this as a building activity, as I think our last process was a board building activity. And I support as many additional meetings as we need, and appreciate other board members' flexibility. So,
okay, thanks, Catherine.
also, just to say that I also support an annual planning session, sort of a longer board retreat that we've had, in June, doing that similarly, doing a longer thing and being able to dig into some issues.
So we do have that scheduled, and you're just
support
saying
that.
you support that? Okay.
So we may want to actually talk about, especially for, Nate and others who have regularly scheduled work days. We may want to talk about the timing for that and what we expect for the time for that.
We probably will still be doing it remotely. Who knows? That's
But
mid-June.
we may want to start earlier, or we may need to go later or split it up, something like that.
Okay. All right. For sure.
Well, oh, go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
I was just gonna say we'll also have to stay flexible, obviously, because we don't know what this seventh person's schedule is gonna be like.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah, that's good feedback, Sam. Go ahead, Nate.
I was just gonna dovetail that I would support us, collectively as a board working on this process, and especially in this kind of setting, with everything that we're dealing with the community and social restrictions, that it still, to the best of our ability, gives us somewhat of a public process, in this work moving forward. So I would support us
Absolutely.
doing it together as a group.
Christy?
So I'm just going to throw a suggestion out there. We've talked just a little bit about, the work meeting, and I think that we should definitely set that for July. That by that point, hopefully, I mean, obviously we'll have a new business administrator and also an interim superintendent, and I think that would just suit us. It would serve us better to move that meeting to July.
I think that's good feedback too. We've got the calendar attached to our meeting agenda, so you can look at what our scheduled meetings are. And I think we ought to consider making all those changes and some additions, at least an initial addition for screening applications for the business administrator, and then maybe move our planning meeting to July tonight. But I first want to, I want to hear from Mike. I haven't heard anything from Mike. Do you have something you'd like to contribute to this conversation, Mike?
Yes.
He punched me in and I punched him out. I kind of, like to think that I would like to personally have near the board meeting, which is the same thing, and some of the other, couple of other school districts that are looking for superintendents. They did that. They met them personally in the boardroom. So maybe not a whole board, what I'd like to do, but of course it's up to you four. You're the ones that make the decision. I just go along with it. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. So again, I'm hearing you'd like to do the interviews in person when we get to that point. And I think we thanks, Mike. All right. Before we move on to actually scheduling these meetings, let's talk about a timeline for appointing an interim superintendent. I'm open to thoughts on that. We obviously will need to have an interim. We've talked about having an interim superintendent, and we will need to have that person in place by July 1st. Other than that, I want to have a board conversation about it. Sam?
I'm just gonna throw this out there, and if people disagree with me, I want to know. I invite your disagreement. This is just where I am in my thinking. So, I think we all can agree that we need someone who can be a strong leader in this time of transition, and that a big part of their responsibility will be bringing the board together, both this board and the next iteration of the board, and leading that board that will be in January 2021 towards a process for hiring someone for the long haul. With that in mind, I'll just say generally my thinking gravitates towards someone who has experience with our district, and it gravitates towards someone who's unlikely to want the job for a long time. I think we have people from within the district that can do it. And I think that we should try to make that decision in the next couple of meetings. I feel like it would probably be unfair to ask our new seventh board member to weigh in on that, just because I feel like the kind of information that you would need to make that kind of decision takes a while to get as a board member. So I'm curious to see if people agree with that assessment or have other things they want to add or disagree with.
So I hear that you're looking for a strong leader, somebody who can bring the board and potentially new board members for the next after the election cycle together, somebody with experience with our district, and somebody who doesn't want to be in the position for a long time. And the last one was, what was the last thing you said, Sam? Sorry, I didn't get it written down.
Just
That we make that decision soon, or we
Yeah.
talk about specifics soon. Okay.
We start that conversation in earnest
Start the conversation soon.
and
Okay.
get it moving.
All right. Who else would like to weigh in on this?
I'm happy to go. I thought I saw Christy's hand.
Sorry, I was writing notes and didn't see you. I'm sorry.
Christy,
You go first. No, you go first,
Okay.
Nate.
All right, perfect. So I agree with Sam in a number of things. I think the only point of disagreement I would have is that I think we could, probably spend our time, and I think incorporating the new board member is a benefit potentially in many ways. But I do support everything you said about obviously a strong leader, somebody who knows our district, and ideally somebody from within the district to start, having those conversations. I think that's where I would really stand, but I don't mind, pushing and incorporating, pushing the timeline a little bit to a similar time frame with the BA position, and I think incorporating our new board member could be a benefit for us potentially.
Okay. Thanks, Nate. Go ahead, Christy.
So I'm going to go in an opposite direction. And I hope that everyone can have an open mind and think about this. I don't think that it would be healthy for us to choose somebody within our district. I think that if we could find somebody who was a retired superintendent, who has that experience, who could hit the ground running, would be more beneficial to us. I also think that, there are a couple of names that have come to mind for me of people who used to be in our district who are now retired that have the experience, of Salt Lake District, but also have the experience of being in a superintendency. I think that for me, the potential of dividing and it being more divisive, within our district by choosing somebody that is already an employee of our district would do us, I think that would not propel us forward. I also think that if there is a person that's within our district that we put in that position, then they would not be of any help to us going forward in the superintendent search. And to be able to have somebody with experience, whether they're a retired person, from our district or a retired superintendent from the state, we need somebody, to help us through this superintendent search, knowing that this is not a permanent position. If we choose somebody from our district, then the possibility of them wanting to apply for the position they would be of no help to us as a board. So I want us to really consider looking at the standard that we set, because even though I know we're in a shorter amount of time, we still need to have that standard of a superintendent the same way that we have, whether it's been with Dr. Cunningham or previous superintendents, when we went through those searches, and saying this is what our expectations are. This is what, we would expect this person to bring to the table. And so I would just really like us to consider, looking at other options outside of our district.
Okay, so I hear that. I hear what you're saying, Christy. You're looking for experience. You're looking for somebody outside of our district. I think I also heard the same things from Sam about somebody who can bring the board together and be a strong leader for the board and for the district, and that somebody who doesn't want the position long term. So I think I think there's a lot of things that you're saying that are the same, right? They may be different. There should be some differences, but there's a lot there that's the same too. So we just need to be, like you said, kind of thinking through this comprehensively. I think I saw a hand. Catherine? Okay.
So I think it's hard for us to know how we're going to feel about individual candidates, inside or outside of the district, or long term versus not long term, until we see, who might apply and we begin the process. So I suggest that rather than talking about that, we talk about beginning the process and getting started on that process. And then, obviously we're not going to say, don't apply if you're, this sort of person, and don't apply if you're this sort of person. So I just think we should get started on that process as quickly as possible. And then, decide among ourselves, evaluate the candidates and decide among ourselves who the best candidates are.
So that's the purpose of this conversation, is to think about that process. And yes, I'll get to you, Nate. I think at a previous board meeting, I took from that specific direction to ask Richard Stoll for some ideas about recently retired or superintendents who might be able to step in, and he is thinking about that, and we'll have some specifics to bring to us. I think that's a conversation, like Catherine said, for when we get to that point. But I think we do need some direction about just the next step, the next process, the next part of the process. Sam?
Sorry, I just wanted to share that I just got a text from a teacher who said that they wanted me to mention that, this person needs to be someone who understands shared governance. And I think that's part of what I was trying to get at when I said, it could certainly be someone that was a retired administrator, like Christy says. But for me, I would really prefer it to be a retired Salt Lake administrator.
Somebody who understands our district is what I heard that. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say, Melissa, is that you'll send us that recommendation from Richard,
right,
as soon as you have it, and then you're looking for us to kind of guide you towards a timeline from there.
Mm-hmm. How you'd like to see this process go, especially as we're talking about, obviously something that's really important for us to do together. I feel like I want your input on all of that. And we're going to be talking about this at every meeting. So, and I'm also happy to take, feedback at any point. So, Mike, did you want to weigh in on this?
Do you have any thoughts about the BAR superintendent?
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, you're on.
Yeah, I want to just make a couple of comments. I want to be able to not be tied down by questions. I'm guided by the board. I want to be able to ask my own questions. Of course, I'll ask the same questions, but I want to be able to ask them. I have some specific things in mind that I would like to ask.
For the superintendent, interim superintendent, and business administrator. Yeah, I think that's fair, Mike. I think we'll have the same kind of conversation about those interviews that we had tonight about appointing a board member, but in more depth as well. Sam?
Catherine, you can go first if you want.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So we talked about having someone with expertise on superintendents and leadership qualities come talk to us. So once again, I suggest that we have that person. I wasn't the person that made the suggestion, but I suggest that we may have that person come talk to us in a study session, possibly even on our next meeting, because I think this is very important to get started right away. And then maybe in that study session, set up a time frame and a plan, after we hear the person speak.
Thanks for that, Catherine. So I was going to get to that. I did talk to Andrea Rohr, and she is scheduled for next Tuesday to come talk to us. But that's something I want to have a discussion in this discussion. What specifically do you want her to address? She's coming to talk to us. Her expertise is in these searches and qualities of superintendents and leadership, but I think we ought to give her some specific direction on things we want her to cover. So I'll take feedback on that too. I think Sam and then Christy. Did I see? Yeah, Sam and then Christy.
Go ahead, Christy. Catherine kind of addressed what I was getting at.
Oh, okay. So I think it goes back to your process question then, Melissa, for direction. I think that obviously we need to have an application process. And whether that's, I know that we asked for a couple of examples of applications. So I think that first and foremost, even though we'd have Andrea come, there's a lot of philosophical, questions, but I think that application needs to go out right away. And so a job description, is pretty, we can garner that, from Richard, or we can, talk to Moselle, or, whoever we want to talk to. But I think that, again, we need to post it as an interim position.
So you would post it. Where would you post it?
Well, I think that, again, we could have Richard, gather those, for us if we'd like him to do that, go through USBA. I think he's more than willing to do that. But I think that I would like us to have whoever is going to apply for, I think they need to apply for the interim. They need to be thoughtful about how they do it. There needs to be, a job description of what that looks like. And then, as Catherine was talking about, when we get down into the nitty gritty, I think that's where, Andrea can help us. But the job description piece, we've got multiple avenues that we can look at, to put that together. But I think that needs to go up immediately.
I'll take input on that, Sam.
I think Nate was ahead of me, but I'd like
Nate. Yep. Sorry, I'm
No.
taking notes, and it's getting, sorry.
It's all good. I certainly appreciate what everybody's saying, of course. I would support us, moving quickly with this, at least the process part of it, right? And I'm okay to kind of timeline this out with a similar process relative to the BA search that we're doing. I'm open to the idea of the application process. I think that's in my opinion a very good and formal way to do that, as opposed to just throwing names into a hat and discussing those in some way. I just worry about timing. I know it's probably fair to keep a posting like that open, and we might have to think about how long we keep that posting open. And I don't know if Richard has the capacity to do that right now. It'd be nice to kind of get his feedback on that. Additionally, relative to Andrea and her conversation, I see her helping us out, not necessarily with hiring an interim superintendent at this point, but really being very mindful with us about how we attract and hire the best RFP search firm, right? And through an RFP process, hire the best search firm through an RFP process. I think that's where her strengths really are with us. And I think that either collectively as a board and a district, either with or without the help of Richard, would be what I would support moving forward.
So let me make sure I understand. Are you suggesting that we don't have Andrea come next Tuesday?
No, I'm suggesting that we still have her come. I think the conversation should be much more specific to um, her expertise relative to an RFP process to hire the best search firm for a permanent 2-year contracted superintendent.
All right. I just want to make sure we aren't biting off too much all in one space, but I appreciate that. Catherine?
So I like what Nate was saying about thinking about this as a big picture when we talk to Andrea. And I think we could certainly think about how this applies to both our current interim and then our long-term search firm and our process for that. And I like the fact that Nate is saying that, maybe rushing right now to do an RFP for the interim superintendent may be, we both may not have enough time, and we also need to consider the ramifications of that. So I would suggest that we think about it really carefully this week, and it's something that we could also possibly discuss in a study session and or a closed session, and that we go ahead and try to make plans for this by next Tuesday.
So can I get some specific about job posting? I'm happy to go forward with a job posting as soon as I have that. I mean, I can work on that tomorrow even.
Can I interject?
Sam?
Sorry.
Sam?
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry, Catherine, you were going to answer my question. Go ahead.
That's fine. I mean, Sam, I can say, I could speak after Sam too, but I would suggest that we hold on that until we've had time to discuss it in a study session and think about it this week and look at the timeline and look at the plan for that.
Okay. So you would hold, Sam?
I agree. I mean, I think what Nate said about making sure that Andrea's presentation with us is focused on the long-term search for a superintendent. I think that's where she can really help us, because that's where her expertise is in those sorts of national searches where you're opening yourself up in order to get the best candidates from all over the country. I think this search should be something that we do together, and I don't say that in the interest of excluding anyone, except that I think that if we open up a call, it's just going to be too long of a process. And we're already adding 3 extra meetings or more for this business administrator search, which I think we need to do. But I think we need to be a little bit more nimble right now. And I know I'm not saying that because I have some kind of hidden agenda that I want to advance. I really think that we owe it to the people that work for the district to deal with this in the next month or so that they know going into the summer that they have someone in place leading the district.
Okay.
And I'm open to different processes that people want to suggest, but I just think opening a call for that would be a mistake. I mean, we're looking for someone that we can trust, and that decision should be based on us coming together, and it should be based on our expertise as board members, I think.
Okay.
And I'm happy to, again, I think we should absolutely look at the recommendations from Richard, but and I hear what Christy's saying too. I mean, I don't want us to appoint someone who in any way would be looking for this job. I think that would be putting them in a position that would be unfair. But I do think there are people who fit the bill of being someone that knows about our district, isn't going to be wanting to be in this position for the long haul, and can keep the ship afloat and can help us think creatively as a board. So I would encourage us to be thinking about that in the next week or so, and maybe maybe we could have, if not at this, but between this meeting and the next, maybe between the next meeting and the next one after that, maybe we could send our thoughts to somebody who could compile them as a disinterested third party. And I mean, we may agree more on this than we think we do. There may be more. If we
Yeah.
all took some time and really thought about it and came up with 3 or 4 names, there might be some names that rose to the top kind of organically, as long as we had whatever kind of skeleton crew support we needed. And that could even be, I mean, I think that could even be you, Melissa, as president, just receiving those suggestions and compiling them and then presenting them to us in a closed session. I don't think that,
I think that's where it would need to be.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that would be inappropriate. And I think people would, I hope, I mean, I hope if people watching feel differently, they'll tell us. But what I'm hearing from my constituents that reach out to me is that they want us to figure this out with some haste. And I think that that's a fair, thing to ask of us, given the situation that we're in.
Okay. Christy, did I see your hand? Thanks, Sam. Go ahead, Christy.
So I appreciate everyone saying, but I'm getting alarmingly frustrated and also concerned about the this hurried rush that we're going to be taking. And I mean, this is one of the, again, even though it's an interim, it's still one of the most important decisions that we make as a board. And so, for the emphasis to be so much on knowing our district, it's not just about that. It's about your management skills. It's about your, knowledge of being in a position that is the CEO of a district. And so just plucking somebody, out without going through some sort of a process, some sort of a screening, to me, that is a disservice to, our district employees, and also, to the standard that we have put in place. So I'm I am I am maybe being, more cautious about this than I should be. I do feel the urgency. We're literally looking at 8 weeks, but at the same time, you know what? This is the position that we're in. This is where the board put us, is in this position. And so there isn't anything else that we can do except look at the situation that we're in and make the best possible decision that we can without putting all these parameters around it. And I I'm highly concerned, and I'm probably going to be, one that's going to be kicking up, kicking at the weeds on this, because I think that for us to move forward quickly based on just saying it's important that they have knowledge of our district and currently in either in employment is concerning to me. And it does make me feel like, that maybe, and maybe it's a possibility that there's going to be this organic conversation around names that are going to be presented, but I'm not feeling that way right now. I'm sort of feeling like maybe there's already names that are being discussed.
No.
So,
no,
but
no,
you know
that's
what, but I need to be able to say that, because
Yeah.
that's obviously a conversation that has been, going on. And, not only maybe within our board members, but also out in our employees, somewhere that's being generated. So I would just say, again, I would like us to see some sort of application process. I would like us to take the care around that. And, and to know, again, even though it's an interim, it's still one of the most important decisions that we make as a board.
okay. Thank you, Christy, and thanks for speaking your mind. And I hope this is a safe place for you to do that. I think it's important that we do have these conversations. I'm glad that we're having it like this, as hard as they are. But I haven't heard one single person tonight say they want to rush this process, that they have already decided who they want it to be, that we're even talking about it in specifics. But we do need to act on this. And it's where we're at, as you said, but I'm going to push back a little bit on you saying that it's the board that's put us in this position. There's multiple factors that have put us now at April 28th to be able to be having this conversation. I think we've had a pandemic, we've got lots of things going on, right? And so do we need to take this seriously? We are taking it seriously. And we are going to need to move quickly. We have to move quickly. As you've said, we've got 8 weeks. So I think that we need to set a goal to get this done and do it well and do it together. And I've seen a couple of hands. Nate, was that you?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I always say this, really appreciate what everybody said, and I really do. Honestly, it's certainly a conversation and a question that comes with a lot of context. So I appreciate everybody's honesty and thoughtfulness with it. I think where I'm at in seeing just some of the differing opinions on the board right now with the conversation, I would think it'd be nice to kind of set, at least at the very end, a goal, as you mentioned, with the end in mind. And I just throwing out a suggestion that we make a commitment to ourselves tonight to hire an interim superintendent by the same time or on the same night that we make the appointment for the business administrator. I don't think that that's unrealistic, and I think that sends a message to the district about how we move that forward. And I think if we set that goal, we could kind of let some of the discussion simmer down and kind of collect in our thoughts and processes over the next week. Or we can pick it up again in like a study session, as Catherine mentioned, or in a closed session, between now and then, or at next week, or even at the end of this meeting. I know we still have some time for that potentially. So I would just suggest that in light of the differing of opinions, that we set a goal to appoint an interim superintendent the same day or night that we appoint the business administrator, and kind of work with the end in mind over these next number of weeks.
Thanks, Nate. That's the kind of direction I was actually hoping in this conversation, that we would have that kind of timeline for when we would appoint, and that we would be talking about how long they would be our interim. Catherine?
So I like Nate's comments very much. I think he's really on target. I think we need to remember that it will require additional meetings during that time period, which I think is great. I think that's fine, and we need to do that. I would also like to add, I probably would add no later than that same evening. If it's possible for us to appoint someone earlier, a week earlier, a couple weeks earlier, that we should certainly go ahead and do that, but certainly no later than the day that we appoint. So.
I think that's good feedback, Catherine. Thank you. Any other? I think maybe we've covered a lot of ground, and let's wrap this up for now. And the direction I'll take is that we'll try and do this thoughtfully, carefully, and be ready to announce early June. And we'll have continued conversations about this, really beginning in earnest next Tuesday with Andrea Rohr. All right, let's look at our calendars and schedule the additional meetings. Do you have your calendars up?
Melissa, do we want to wait for our new board member?
I think we need to schedule at least one now. And potentially the July. No, I think we need to, at least for that May one where we screen applications, I'd like to get that on our calendar so we can post it and prepare for it.
Melissa,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, because we're talking about the need for 3 additional meetings. That almost brings us to a week-to-week kind of schedule, instead of our usual every other week, and sometimes longer. I know when we started meeting virtually after everything COVID-19 and community restrictions and social distancing took place, that we just kind of scheduled out to meet every week, and that if it was a choice for us not to need that we would make that decision in a timely manner. So I might just suggest that we plan on meeting every week, and once we have a greater sense of the schedule for our new board member and other responsibilities that we might have in the world, I think just getting that scheduled and noticed, and of course, if we need to cancel within the appropriate time, then we can do that.
And just recognizing that there's a lot of preparation in planning for these meetings as well from a lot of people besides the 7
Oh, yeah.
of us.
I've learned that being vice president.
So that's why I want to get them on this schedule so that there's the ability to plan.
Melissa, I really think that we should wait. I mean, we are appointing a new board member on the 5th of May, right?
Yes, that's
And
what we're hoping
so
to do.
for us to wait until we know what that person's schedule is going to be, it's, I mean, the closing of the application for business administrator isn't until is it the 18th of May?
It's the 18th.
So
Yes.
I don't know who it was who said that. Maybe it was Sam. I can't remember who said that, but I'm going to be in agreement. I think that we should hold off on scheduling any meetings until after we have the new board member seating, and that's next week.
Well, we won't have them in order to make that decision next week. What I'd like to do is.
What do you mean? I'm sorry. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, they'll be brand new. They'll be sworn in at the very end.
Right, and so we would
so
be
we
able
can-
to.
Yeah, that's what so I'm happy to do that. But then let's make sure that we come back with some specific meetings. Look at your calendar and let's kind of have a proposal for what those meetings, when those meetings would be. In your mind, on your calendars, know what would work for you so that we can have this conversation and take care of it. Nate?
Sorry to interrupt you, Melissa. I think in not only having us look at our calendars, when you send out that information, I just request that the information from Richard about his timeline and process and potential dates, that we also be very mindful of that information when we bring our schedules back for next week.
Okay. I'll send you that proposed timeline and you can look at what dates might work for you within that. And then we'll try and do that so we can update the schedule as quickly after that as possible.
Perfect, thank you.
Does that sound fair from everyone? Okay, seeing mostly thumbs up. So that gets us through our discussion. All right, I'm going to turn the light on in here. We don't have anything on action because we've taken care of that as we went. How about board member reports? Starting with, how about with you, Christy? We'll go from 7 to 1. Have a board member report for us?
I don't. Thanks.
Malcolm turned in his interest. He wanted me to share that. And I sent them all. All right.
Thank you, Mike. Is that your board member report? Anything else, Mike, then?
No, I'm good.
All right. Sam?
I'll waive my report as well. Thanks.
Nate?
Yeah, I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to everybody on the board and of course in the district, Lexi, Janet. If there's representatives at the district office, thank you for your work and commitment. And certainly just echo what was discussed already, that it was really nice to hear from all of our teachers and even support staff like our school counselors and psychologists, who are also weighing in on priorities that SLE has put forward and kind of what our process is moving forward as well. And then of course I did attend the East High SCC, and it was really fun to see everybody's faces in that group, and then of course hear about their plans moving forward on a number of different things like graduation, for example. So just a heartfelt thanks to everybody in the district. I know how hard everybody's working, and I just appreciate everybody so much.
Okay, Catherine.
So thanks, Nate, for saying a lot of those thank yous. I really appreciated it, and I feel the same way. I think Christy mentioned that West High has signs. I think I actually mentioned that in the USBA meeting that we attended on Friday. But it was great to have the teachers deliver signs to West High students, to all graduating West High students, and it's fun to see them on lawns. Not doing a lot of traveling around, but I've seen a few, and it's really great to have that. And I appreciate their efforts, the teachers' efforts, and I think it meant a lot to the kids. You can see some of the pictures on Facebook, and I have one on my school board page. I did hear that there might be some construction going on at West High, and if that's the case, I'd love to hear more about that and have that go through the SCC. Make sure that the SCC and the SIC knows about that construction if that's going to happen. So I'd love to have that report from the superintendent, next week if there's something going on with that. I just wanted to say that I had this idea for our district. I think this is a really interesting moment that for our students, and an emotional moment, and something that will obviously impact them going forward. And I'd love to see our district do an online sort of COVID journal or coronavirus novel sort of, where students are able to submit. I don't want anyone to be required to do it. I don't want teachers to all of a sudden require this, but submit literary works or artworks really about this moment, about their experience of this moment. We can make this a 7 to 12 kind of thing. It wouldn't cost much except for maybe someone tasked, maybe one of our parapros that have computer skills that could put it together online and hosted by our own server. But they could really think about, have students be able to reflect on this experience and sort of showcase their own ideas and their own thoughts about what's going forward. Like I said, I wouldn't want this to be a mandatory thing. I wouldn't want teachers to make this an assignment that kids have to do, but something that they're offered to do as really a time for them to reflect and think about and contemplate what this means. And then for us to have as a district, to think about this, what does this mean to our students? How did our students reflect about this? What was their schooling experience? What was their personal experience? So I just would love to see that. And obviously, we'd have to do it pretty quickly if we did that. But I don't think it would take much time to roll that out. And I'm wondering what the rest of the board thinks about that kind of an idea.
Well, I love that. I think that sounds like a great idea. I think having a record of this time period would be really cool. So would you see it being maybe posted on the district webpage, or how do you see that, and how do we move that forward? Maybe we could talk about it next Tuesday specifically. If the board is in support of that idea, I'm happy to talk about it next Tuesday on how to make something like that. It's an interesting, thoughtful idea, Catherine. I like it.
Yeah, so I think there'd just be a link on the website to the Salt Lake City School District students' COVID-19 journal or novel, coronavirus novel, so to speak. The idea that our students could reflect in literature, in stories, in poetry, in art, anything that could be represented on a computer and that they could do and submit. Like I said, I don't want this all of a sudden to be every English teacher's assignment. I don't want this to be a mandatory thing for our kids, but I'd love to see it be an extra credit assignment or a possibility, or just time for students to really think about what's happening in their lives and to think about this moment, and for us to be able to have that sort of journal of what this experience has been like for students. And so, like I said, I'd love to see it for 7 to 12. I think that actually younger students might be able to participate as well. They might need more guidance, but I think it'd be easy for students to do that. And I think it could include even things like TikToks, if they wanted to, if they had a TikTok that they wanted to submit about this experience. I just think it could really be wide ranging, but it would need to sort of have the focus of, what has been my experience as a student, with coronavirus and with this. So that's how
record keeping. Yeah.
I mean, if I worry that if we start next week, we have even, 7 fewer days, but, we might not be able to do it sooner than that.
Okay, well, I do see, I see a couple hands, so I want to make sure I get Nate, and then I want Lexi to address this too. Nate?
Yeah, for sure. And I know this isn't necessarily our discussion portion, so I'll keep it very brief. But in my work at the library, we're going to be implementing a new software called BiblioBoard. And communities, of course, within the library and then, of course, within the larger Salt Lake community can actually submit things to BiblioBoard to be archived. And we've already talked about how we might collect stories in the community about their experiences with COVID-19 and social distancing and all the above. And if this is a discussion item for next week, I'd be happy to pull together, the information and resources if we want to partner with the library on that, because it'll be something that will be hosted for quite some time and archived with us too.
That's interesting. Any other comment? Is there Lexi? Do you want to weigh in on this too?
Yeah, one of the things that Tiffany Hall and working with Leah is we've had a memory wall up that we are encouraging students on Friday to they can put their thoughts on the memory board. We can expand it to include art, but that was something that we thought would be a good way to that every Friday is to have that opportunity for students. And I will just talk to Tiffany about making sure that we have pictures, art, and adding the TikTok. And it's optional, it's not necessary, but it's just an activity for students on Friday if they to do that. And that came about in collaboration with SLEA leadership.
That's great. I would want to make sure we're messaging that out better, because I haven't seen that. Sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
No, I love that idea. I'm thinking really of more formally polished pieces. Than I love the memory wall idea. I'm so glad that people are doing that. Right. I think that's really a great way for kids to communicate, and I hadn't heard about it either. So those are the kinds of things that I'd love to see messaged on our parent reports, things like that. But I'm thinking about, I mean, they don't have to be perfect pieces, but really students spending some time thinking about it, and doing a haiku cycle or a mini short story about what their life is like, or an actual memoir, very short memoir about what their life is like, or a poem or an art piece or something, really something that's pretty thoughtful about this experience. So it wouldn't be memory wallish in a way. It would be really, pieces that were representative and thoughtful about their time.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea. Sam?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I don't think it would be difficult to start collecting that stuff. And then when we had more time, think about a way to kind of how to process it and
memorialize it, keep it. Yeah. Lexi, do you feel comfortable maybe adding something like that? And then we could talk about it again, but maybe you could talk to Tiffany about that and share these thoughts with her.
Yeah, I've been texting her as you've been talking. So I've been texting her your ideas. So I'll talk to her. I have a meeting with her tomorrow about some other things, and I'll just add this because I think we can easily add that.
Okay. Well, that's kind of exciting. Thank you. And then we'll update it. You'll update us on kind of where you're at, Lexi, based on this conversation. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Just a couple things I'd like to add. I want to say thank you for making the time for these extra meetings, but also for our subcommittees. I know that those are scheduled for that same week of May 18th. But I appreciate you doing that and taking that seriously. I also appreciate you looking at the clean energy resolution in those subcommittees, and appreciate the work that Lexi and Paul Schulte have done, and probably Janet as well, in giving us a financial look at that. But I want to make sure that that conversation is being had, and I thank you for doing that. I also know that we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and the conversations have been haven't always been easy, but I think for the most part we're not that far apart, and so I appreciate us really being able to hash things out and work through things. and really appreciate the time commitment that you've given to it, and the thought. So thank you, and that's all I'm going to say, except for I'm really pleased with the conversations I see happening in schools too, and my own child is camping right now, so he's managing to play socially distance as well and do school. So thank you all. And I'm going to just, before we close, give the time to Lexi for a superintendent update, and then we'll adjourn.
No, just I'd like to thank James Tobler and Mike Harmon for being here and representing SLEA, and I've been following the comments on line. It looks like you've had a lot of people watching tonight, so I'd like to thank everybody for watching and following what we're doing in the district. There's comments that I've seen, and we've still got some work to do, so thank you.
Yeah, that I feel like it'll be it's interesting to see how that Facebook live streaming went. So I appreciate everybody's effort to make this as open a process as we can make it, and we are, of course, are always looking for feedback on what we need to be thinking about, what we need to be working on, and how we could improve. So we'll take that feedback at any time. Thank you. Thanks to our whole community for participating. And I'm sorry, James and Mike, that I didn't know you were at the district office as we started. I would have welcomed you myself. I'm really grateful that you're there and for the work that you're doing. All right, if there's nothing else, we need to, Patrick, can I ask you a question? Do we need to continue to go into a closed session? Do we need to make that motion now before we adjourn?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Melissa, I can go ahead and make that motion if you'd like.
Thank you.
So I move that the board go into closed executive session to discuss negotiations or character and competency of an individual on this day, April 28th at 8:50 p.m.
Second the motion.
Second. Okay, let's go ahead. Any discussion? I guess we don't need discussion. Then let's vote on that.
Is Mike here still?
Did Mike go?
No, he's coming back. I think he stepped out for just a minute, but he is coming right back in.
Okay, so we'll
Catherine
go
Kennedy,
ahead.
yes.
Okay.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Emil Hansen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Melissa Ford, yes. Do we need to wait for Mike to complete the vote, or are we okay?
You want to come say yes? Say yes on the vote. They would like to go into closed session and they need your yes.
Yes.
He's a yes.
Okay.
You can come right back now, and I'm going to stop the stream.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. The public meeting is adjourned.